Good morning. Rise and shine to the morning momentum. Your daily dose of a comprehensive rundown of the top stories making the headline. Today being Friday, the 17th of May, 2024. Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Alfonsoh. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib Media TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines. On the Daily Nation this morning, the elephant in the room, Deep State House repairs money pit. Now, State House controller tells MPs President Ruto wants budget slashed. The Treasury will allocate close to R1 billion shillings annually for 12 years from 2015 to 2027 to refurbish 3 state houses and 10 state lodges, according to documents before Parliament, revealing massive spending of taxpayers' cash on the buildings at the expense of more pressing issues, including funding for vital education programs. More of that story is beefed up for you on page 10 and page 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also inside the Daily Nation, Kenya and Uganda strike SGR oil pipeline deals. Now, Kenya and Uganda have agreed to jointly extend the oil pipeline from Eldoret to Kampala in a deal that will see Uganda directly import refined petroleum through Kenya. Oil has tested the strength of the bond between the two neighbors, with the feud even spilling into the corridors of justice at the East African Court of Justice in Arusha, Tanzania. More of that story is beefed up for you on page 6. Also on page 8 this morning, Haiti mission on as 200 police officers fly out next week. Officials, aware of the deployment, have revealed that the first team of about 200 officers is set to arrive in Caribbean nation next week. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 8. On page 2, budget cuts set to cripple learning in 4 universities. Now, students who will begin their 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th years of studies in September in 4 universities are at risk of dropping out after the National Treasury failed to allocate any funds for their studies. That is a top story making the headlines on page 2. Also on page 1, page 5, Limuru 3, sharp divisions as Mount Kenya meets. 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. Opposition politicians led by NAC Kenya leader Martha Karua converge today for the Limuru 3 summit, which appears to have split the populous Mount Kenya region down the middle, with some leaders, including former presidential candidate Peter Kenneth, vowing to give it a wide berth, even as he warms up to DP Gachagwa's overtures. You want to catch up with more of that on page 4 and page 5 of the Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 2. Now, budget cuts set to cripple learning in 4 universities. Affected universities have not been allocated any cash in the 2024-2025 budget estimates. Public universities are struggling to stay afloat. Students who will begin their 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th years of studies in September in 4 universities are at risk of dropping out after the National Treasury failed to allocate any funds for their studies. The 2024-2025 budget policy statement had allocated the University of Nairobi 1.725 billion shillings, Moi University 1.3 billion shillings, University of Eldoret 702 million shillings, and University of Kabianga 339.6 million Kenya shillings. More of that is beefed up for you on page 2 and page 3. In numbers, 11 billion shillings is the deficit that the Higher Education Loans Board will have if the 2024-2025 budget estimates are adopted. 30% is what universities will get for the cost of their programs under the differentiated unit cost model if budget estimates are adopted. More of that also still on page 2. On page 3, IG seeks funds for Shakahola probe and police reforms. Kome tells MPs investigations into the massacre have drained the service's operations resources. Implementation of Maraga team proposals not allocated funds in the supplementary budget. Still on page 2, 18-year-old with Kenyan roots accepted in 4 Ivy League varsities. An American young man with Kenyan roots is making headlines in the United States after getting accepted to 4 Ivy League universities. Emmanuel Gitu, 18, was accepted to a total of 31 colleges, including Ivy League universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Cornell. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 2 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 4, sharp divide among Mount Kenya leaders over today's Limuru 3 meeting. Previous meetings have seen the Mount Kenya community speak in one voice on various issues. Opposition leaders say the meeting will discuss Ruto regime's #tax policies. Now, opposition politicians led by NAK Kenya leader Martha Karua converged today for the Limuru 3 summit, which appears to have split the populous Mount Kenya region down the middle. At the same time, Public Service Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria claimed that he had been invited to offer a keynote address during the gathering that is largely expected to be critical of President William Ruto's administration. You want to catch up with more of that on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 5, Kenneth, why I'll not attend the conference. According to Peter Kenneth, the Limuru 3 meeting should be about the economy of the Mount Kenya region. The former presidential candidate, Peter Kenneth, speaks to Mwangi Muiruri about his new political project as he dismisses the Limuru 3 conference as a mischievous political venture and admits he is in talks with the DP Gachagua and former President Uhuru Kenyatta. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 6. Kenya, Uganda agree to extend pipeline and SGR to Kampala. Now, Museveni is on a 2-day state visit to Kenya. The extension will facilitate trade ties between the two nations. Now, Kenya and Uganda have agreed to jointly extend the oil pipeline from Eldoret to Uganda in a deal that will see Kampala directly import refined petroleum products through Nairobi. The extension, Nairobi said, will facilitate trade ties between the two nations. The two nations have also agreed to extend the standard gauge railway to Kampala through the Democratic Republic of Congo as an efficient and sustainable infrastructural artery for the transportation of goods. Those insights are beefed up for you on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 8. Initial 200 of Kenyan police to arrive in Haiti next week. The U.S. military is setting up a barrack in Haiti where the Kenya police officers will be operating from. Deployment comes 7 months after Kenya got go-ahead to lead multinational mission. In numbers, 1,000 is the total number of Kenyan police officers who will be deployed to the strife-torn Caribbean nation to lead a multinational force in a bid to restore peace in Haiti. The first team of Kenyan police officers are set to land in Haiti next week. Officials aware of the deployment have revealed that the first team of about 200 officers are set to arrive in the Caribbean nation on May 23rd and 24th, timed to coincide with a state visit by President William Ruto to the United States. That is a top story you want to catch up with on page 8 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on to page 10. State House repairs cost Kenyans 1 billion shillings annually. Now, MPs demand to know why taxpayers should shoulder such colossal amounts on the refurbishment at a time when Kenyans are reeling under the current high cost of living with higher taxes hanging over their heads. The government will spend 11.5 billion shillings in 12 years between 2015 and 2027 to renovate all state houses and state lodges. Now, the status of project implementation as at 31st March 2024, we have a few projects here. Let's take a look at a few of them. We have refurbishment of buildings at Nairobi State House. Estimated cost is in million shillings. We have 1.772 billion shillings. Start was 1st July 2015 and end June 30th, 2027. County and sub-county, that is in Nairobi Westlands. The accumulative cost to March 31st, 2024 is 761.08. Now, projections in millions. In 2025-2026, that is projected at 280 million shillings, and 2026-2027, it is projected at 305.01 million shillings. We have purchase of specialized plant, equipment, and machinery projected 2025-2026 at 40 million, and 2026-2027 at 50 million Kenya shillings. The refurbishment of buildings at Eldoret State Lodge are projected at 100 million Kenya shillings in 2025-2026 and 100 million shillings in 2026-2027. There is also the Kisii State Lodge, which is projected at 6.29 million shillings in 2025-2026 and 7.02 million shillings in 2026-2027. Refurbishment of buildings at Mtito Andei State Lodge is projected at 6.55 million Kenya shillings 2025-2026 and 7.31 million shillings in 2026-2027. The total amount, or rather the projection for 2025-2026 is at 1,885 million, and 2026-2027 is at 1,585 million. Now, allocations for renovations at State House and State Lodges in 2023. In Nairobi, it costs 643 billion 762 million and 27. Now, also in Mombasa, it costs 42 million shillings. In Nakuru, it costs 23 million shillings, 153,835. In Kisumu, the projection in 2026-2027 is at 4,431,235 Kenya shillings. In Mtito Andei, the projection is at 1,490,227. So here's the total projection for 2025-2026. It is for the State House, it is 169,562,000. For the Deputy President, it stands at 17,630,000. For the projection of 2026-2027, the State House projection is at 748,074,586, while the Deputy President projection is 20,400,000. More of those insights on page 10. On page 11, still works Nairobi State House far from complete. It is 43% done. Presently, the refurbishment of the State House Nairobi is at 43%. State House Mombasa is at 30%, while the refurbishments at Nakuru State House are at 31%. More of those at page 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 12. Chicken Gate scandal haunts judge hopeful. Officials were accused of taking bribes for tender. The Kenyan based in the US has petitioned the Judicial Service Commission opposing the candidacy of Mr. Hassan. More of that story is beefed up for you on page 12 of the Daily Nation this morning. Still on page 12, delegation from Eswatini on tour of Murang'a to learn about devolution. Yesterday's visit to the county by a delegation from the Kingdom of Eswatini presented Murang'a with an opportunity to showcase its achievements in devolution despite teething problems such as delayed disbursements from the exchequer. Governor Irungu Kang'ata and members of the County Assembly held a consultative meeting with more than 20 members of the delegation that was led by Minister of Tinhundla Administration and Development of Eskhumbuzo Lamini. Let's move on and take a look at the expert opinion on the Daily Nation this morning. Taiwan is part of China. Now, today, 183 countries maintain diplomatic relations with China based on one China principles. These are sentiments by Zhu Pingjian, who is a geopolitics specialist. You want to catch up with more of those opinions on page 17. Also, stop gatekeeping in judiciary. Judicial Service Commission must ensure justice and fairness in the recruitment of judges. Those are sentiments by Newton Arori, and you want to catch up with more of those insights also on page 17 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also, still on the expert opinion, Linturi trials, media stories, plus why big words irritate audiences. These are sentiments by Peter Mwaura, the story explaining why the attempt to impeach Mr. Linturi failed is not balanced. You want to catch up with more of those insights. On page 19, let's take a look at page 20, the DN2, the Voice article. Today it's all about lights, camera, and empowerment behind the lens. They've made significant strides in a traditionally male-dominated field. Meet the 8 Kenyans reshaping the art of filmmaking. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the DN2 Voice article. Now, just a quick review of this. As women increasingly assert their presence behind the camera, data reveals they now make up 40% of those directly employed in Kenya's film industry, marking significant strides in once male-dominated realm. While filmmakers in other African nations grapple to find their footing into the film industry, Kenya is among the countries where women have made stride in front of and behind the camera. They are leading the way and inspiring more women to assert their presence in reshaping narratives within the African film industry. More of those are beefed up for you again on page 4 and page 5 of the DN2 article. Among the few who are shining, we have Victoria Goro, there is Lynn Gitau, Damaris Irungu, Grace Murema, Sarah Owendi Ayiso, Dennis Kibusu Ngibuino, Agnes Kola, and Ivy Wangui. All their sentiments are beefed up for you on the DN2 article. Now, let us shift gears and take a look at the county news on the Daily Nation this morning. MP summon Kihika over hospital takeover debacle. The development follows a petition tabled by Senator Tabitha Karanja. Nakuru War Memorial Hospital CEO will also shed light on allegations of forceful eviction. That is in Nakuru County. And still in Nakuru County, prosecutors to blame for collapse of drug cases, police claim. Now, bureaucratic red tape is hindering the war on drug trafficking. The National Police Service has said officers cited the requirement by the DPP for a report from the government chemist providing the chemical composition of nabbed narcotics such as bang before approving charge sheets. That is a top story you want to catch up with on page 23. Briefly, in Kwale County, bars near schools now face closure. The county government has embarked on a crackdown on bars and drinking joints located near schools. In Homa Bay County, all set for UDA polls tomorrow. Now, the United Democratic Alliance has assured its members in the county that the second phase of its grassroots elections scheduled for tomorrow will be more credible than the one conducted last month. It was in Gishu County. Help is at hand for flood victims. Help is at hand for victims of flooding in the North Rift region following the formation of a team to oversee the resettlement of displaced families, and repair of damaged infrastructure. You want to catch up with more of those county news on page 23. On page 24, Nasir Mbarire agreed to fight Muguka menace. Mombasa has imposed several restrictions on Muguka business. Governors say they will collaborate to keep the stimulant away from children. Now, anti-Sakaja protests rock Nairobi over illegal constructions. Demonstrations staged a sit-in outside City Hall in Nairobi yesterday while protesting against unplanned developments and evictions in the capital. That is also a top story making the headlines on page 24 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, from that, let us now shift gears and take a look at the international scene, and we start with Seychelles. Now, diplomacy. Seychelles fronts ex-vice president for continental position Musa Mahamat Faki took office in 2017 after defeating Kenya's Amina Mohamed. Candidate from Djibouti is fluent in English, Arabic, and French. Now, Kenya's veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga's bid for the Africa Union Commission chairmanship faces a new hurdle after Seychelles endorsed the candidacy of former Vice President Vincent Meriton. Others eyeing the seat are Fauzia Yusuf Adam of Somalia and Djibouti Foreign Minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 26. Briefly, in Kampala, Uganda, South Sudanese die in Uganda blaze. At least 6 South Sudanese were killed in a fire in the Ugandan capital of Kampala on Wednesday, a police spokesperson said. The blaze engulfed the residence of a South Sudanese citizen in Mulanda B, Kisubi, about 1 a.m. You want to catch up with more of that on page 26. On page 27, in Washington, Biden and Trump agreed to 2 debates. U.S. President Joe Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump, the presumptive nominees for the Democratic and Republican parties in the presidential election, have agreed to hold debates in June and September. In London, hundreds of inmates to be released early. The British government triggered emergency measures to release some criminals from prisons early and delay the start of certain court hearings to prevent crowding in jails. Also, Xi lauds China-Russia ties as Putin arrives in Beijing. Russian leader is sending a message to the world about his priorities. No limits in partnership. Let's move on and take a look at business news now. Women outnumber men in KCB Group workforce. Corporates in Kenya rolling out incentives for female employees. Also, COP first quarter profit up to 8% to 6.5 billion Kenya shillings. The Cooperative Bank of Kenya has posted a 7.7% growth in net profit to 6.58 billion shillings in the first quarter and March, following increased income and contained operating costs. In matters taxation, taxes on mosquito repellents to end. The entire supply chain of mosquito repellents from manufacture to use will be exempted from paying taxes should MPs approve proposals in the Finance Bill 2024. In matters healthcare, rural hospitals get boost from Amazon Web. The Rural and Urban Private Hospitals Association has received $3.7 million shillings in promotional credits from American technology firm Amazon Web Services. Now let's move on and take a look at the sports news this morning, and we start with golf. Now, Loram, towering pro whose amateur record in Nakuru still stands. The Golf Kenya president, Ochola, mourned Loram as a great teacher of the sport. Nakuru player died on Monday at Mercy Mission Hospital. Now, in matters cycling, Alaphilippe wins Giro Stage 12. Frenchman Julian Alaphilippe's early break paid off as a Sodal quick-step rider bravely held off the chasers to win Stage 12 of the Giro d'Italia yesterday, with Tajed Pogacar maintaining his hold on the leader's jersey. Now, the KCB Group East Africa Golf Tours heads to Nakuru. Now, KGU chairman Philip Ochola returns to Nakuru, where he was once a club captain. Event has so far been played in Eldoret, Kericho, Nandi, Kakamega, Mombasa, Nyeri, and Nairobi. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 37. Let's take a look at page 38, and we take a look at the Kenyan football. Stars may well play June's World Cup qualifiers in Nairobi after all. Gor coach confident of securing title on Sunday after dropping points in Murang'a. We've invented CAF to re-inspect Nyayo Sports, PS Tum tells parliamentary team. On page 39, it's all about transforming Kenya's creative economy one talent at a time. Under the guidance of His Excellency President William Ruto, the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Creative Economy and Sports has received explicit directives to execute the creative economy blueprint, marking a significant step in revolutionizing Kenya's creative landscape. With a bold vision outlined in the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, aptly dubbed the plan, the administration has identified the creative economy as a cornerstone of Kenya's economic transformation. More of those are beefed up for you on page 39. Now, on the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning, backlash over lack of funds for school feeding initiative. State urged to reconsider its decision not to allocate money for it. NAT officials and a section of elected representatives have criticized move by Treasury. And lastly, in turn, teachers piled pressure on state as unions back their demands for improved terms. Nationwide protests by junior secondary school teachers serving as interns entered its fourth day yesterday as the teachers demanded a change of their terms of service and the unions rallied behind them. Now, with that story of intern teachers strike, we come to an end of today's session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV and especially the Morning Momentum. By extension, my heartfelt gratitude to all those who made this broadcast a success. The Chief Controller, Anifa, Kavira. Now, see you on Monday, same time, same place. Until then,